Takes a second. Hello, everyone. This is Lindsey Baker with the Action Hour, and I am very excited to have with me tonight Jade Ara, who is the author of Stop Yulin Podcast. Hi, Jade. How are you today? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous, and I'm really excited to hear the news out of China that you're going to talk about, and also about your fabulous podcast and some of the leading people in the fight against the dog and cat meat trade that you've been interviewing and all that good stuff. So you want to get started? You want to tell us a little bit? What do you want to start with? I want to kind of leave that up to you. What would you like to start with?
Well, basically, I'll just explain to your viewers a little bit more about the podcast. I started the first and only podcast on the dog cat meat trade back in October of 2019, last year. And my first guest was the filmmaker behind Dog War, which is an upcoming film that will tell the story of the brutal dog meat farms in South Korea.
What is the, say that name again, because you went by it pretty quick.
Oh, it's a Dog War.
Dog War. Okay,
yes.
Great.
And so my first guest on the podcast was Andrew Abrahams-Wilson, who's the filmmaker behind Dog War. And we're all very excited. It's been in the making for about 2 years. And obviously, like any film, it demands huge budget and time and resources. But we're getting there. I think it'll be released in 2020.
Wow.
It'll be very good because it's a film that doesn't, it's not like an activist film. It's a film that's going to be appealing to a mainstream audience. And that's very important in our fight against the dog cat meat trade, because we need to have this issue exposed to as many people as possible around the world. And so with streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and HBO, the film has a great chance of doing just that, like exposing the issue to a worldwide audience.
Now, there have been some other movies to this on this subject. Lisa Vanderpump did a film about it, and several others. And why do you think those movies really didn't gain enough traction to, I mean, they did have an effect, but not, you know, a very overall worldwide effect on it?
Yes, I think it's also it's a niche market. Okay, like my podcast, it appeals to the community of activists that are fighting the dog cat meat trade mostly, also other animal activists. But I think in the case of Road to Yulin, which was Lisa Vanderpump's documentary, I think it did good because it was seen in festivals, and some audiences that followed her as a celebrity got to see it, and got to hear about the cause. So it did make some waves, but not like this film Dog War might, because the film Dog War is very Americana. It's got Americana written all over it, because not only does it talk about the dog meat farms in South Korea, but also, America loves dogs, right? So I think that would appeal to America's audience, and also it depicts former war veterans. Okay, so we love our vets, and so they are the ones who are going to South Korea to rescue these dogs. And so, like, the storyline is very appealing. And they don't show too much graphic footage, so they keep it more appealing to a wide audience with children and all that. So.
Yeah, I was a little afraid that we were going to get a little too much graphic. There is one video that you clip that you gave me that starts off a little grim when we see that poor dog in the cage, but I think it's important for people to see that. But then I don't want to spoil it. In fact, let's jump into one of the clips with Jill Robinson that you had.
And actually, Zhuhai, the news came out on April 14th, so it's very recent. It seems that Shenzhen has set maybe their precedents because it's groundbreaking. It's a landmark decision, and it comes into effect May 1st.
Yes. We've been investigating these low-value markets now for 34 years, I have to say. even before I founded Animals Asia, and this is something that we absolutely have to celebrate. Of course, there's a long way to go, and of course, there's species like fur-bearing animals.
Yeah. So what she was just about to comment, but we got cut off, was that there are other species that we also need to be aware of that need help. And so the focus is not only on the dog and cat meat, but that's where she's starting. Is that right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I had Jill on the podcast back in February, and then we organized another recording because so much news was coming out of China. And I wanted Jill, who's an authority on the subject. I mean, Jill Robinson has been doing this for over 35 years. She lives in Hong Kong. She works in China. And she's very well aware of the situation. And so what happened is on April 1st, Shenzhen, which is a city in the Guangdong province, which is a big area for dog meat trade, was the first city to officially ban the dog cat meat trade and wildlife trade, so both. And so that was a historical moment. It's the first time any city in China bans any kind of animal from consumption.
Let me just play the devil's advocate 1 second here, because I know we're going to get this from people that have been following this story for a long time, such as myself. And I did ask you a question about this. We hear almost every year, I've been following this for 5 years, and every year it'll come out that it's been banned in this area, or it's been banned here. And then it turns out not to be true. So can you address that for people and kind of ease their minds on that question?
Yes, I know, because on social media, people were very quick to dismiss that news, saying that it's not true. It's just like to appease local and global activists. But it is actually true. It's a real law. And Shenzhen is it's the connection between Hong Kong and mainland China. So it's a big city. It's a very important city. It's the 5th largest city in China. And I don't think in that city in particular they would eat a lot of dog cat meat trade. And because of COVID-19 and the pandemic that ensued, it's causing a lot of governments around the world to re-examine their practices with animals and their animal agricultural practices, and et cetera. And obviously live animal markets are big, highly responsible for viruses like this. And there was SARS, there was MERS. It's always come from exploitation of animals.
Absolutely.
And so Shenzhen was very quick to do it, and they came first. And then a couple of weeks later, on April 14th, Zhuhai, which is another city in Guangdong province, just across from Macau.
Dog in the slaughterhouse.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to show, just excuse me for one, I just wanted to show this one shot. Well, please continue.
Yes, okay. So see, we're seeing these dogs are, the dog cat meat trade, why we're so opposed to it, it's not regulated. And the problem with the dog cat meat trade, the fact that it's not regulated, means these dogs are sick. They have diseases. It's a health risk for the population to consume. And it's obviously an ethical problem. These dogs are tortured. I mean, it's torture. The way they're crammed into wire cages, they're put on trucks. They travel for days on end without food or water. Many of them die from heat stroke, suffocation. They have broken limbs. They try to fit the maximum amount of dogs per cage.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect display of why we're against this. It's horrific. And the truth of the matter is, dogs eating and consumption in China is a fringe, a very small percentage of the population in China that actually eats dogs. It's really not regulated. It's overseen by criminal organizations. It's riddled with crime because most of these dogs in China, they're stolen pets. Right. They're strays that are snatched off the street. There's no actual dog farms. They did away with that many years ago because they found that it's much cheaper if you just steal a dog and taking them off the street. It reduces your cost to almost nothing. And
well, I happen to have seen quite a few dog farms So that's one thing I'm not quite sure about myself, and we'd have to kind of check into that a little more, because I know there's two sides of that story too as well. But before we go any further, let's look at a couple more clips of you and Jill, and that'll probably bring up some points to talk about here.
Okay.
All righty. So,
and as you read, Shenzhen and Now Zhuhai just this week have both come out with their regulations to ban the consumption of dogs and cats.
Yes. Which are fantastic news, and something that I almost had to pinch myself. I wasn't sure if it was true, but it is actually true. It's very true. So it was obviously corroborated by many organizations, including Dr. Peter J. Lee, who's HSI's China Policy Specialist, by Jill Robinson of Animals Asia. So these two laws, Shenzhen and Zhuhai, it's official. It came into effect May 1st of 2020. So no more dog, cat meat consumption in those cities. The penalties are pretty high. So I think it will be very successful in containing that.
I used to go to Shenzhen and just next door in Guangzhou. I mean, these places are seen as, the south of China has been one of the hubs of cat and dog eating in the whole country. So for Shenzhen to come out and make such a marked decision like this is absolutely fantastic.
That's right. So I mean, there you have it. It's official. It's not propaganda. It's really very true, and we're very grateful. The whole community is celebrating this. They're victories. I mean, it's historical. So very happy about that. And also April 9th, obviously the Ministry of Agriculture in China said that dogs were now considered companion animals, and they took them off. Well, they're not on the white list of animals that can be bred for consumption, and their fur or skin. So that is also an historical decision. It's not a law, but the fact that the Chinese government is coming out and saying dogs are companion animals, it's going to deter a lot of the activities, I think. And the mainstream population really does respect the governments in China. And so when the government is saying something, they pay attention. So I think
absolutely. Let's watch. I think I have one more, so we'll just watch one more from Jill. Hope I didn't.
What it's seeing as well, I think you've seen too, is that the National Catalogue of Livestock has also now been revised to include no cats and dogs. And this is countrywide, and they're putting this out for public feedback and commentary.
Yes.
And Animals Asia is there commenting as well, and we're hoping, at the moment they've left both dogs and cats out of this revision, and although they are more mentioning dogs than cats, but we're trying to
that was one of the points that we were trying to make, because a lot of animal activists over here, they were like, okay, but what about cats? I was thinking the same thing, because when they came out, they specified dogs and not cats. And for us, dogs and cats are the same thing. They're domesticated animals. They're our companions. And so we were very quick to send some emails out. But it seems that cats are not on the list of livestock. So no one could rightfully consume cats. They might, run into problems with the law, because you cannot run an operation selling dog meat if dogs are not to be sold as livestock, right?
And I understand the Chinese government can be pretty brutal in enforcing their laws, so I think that people will pay attention. What do you think?
Well, that's always been our concern, is that, there's some laws that were passed. For example, in Vietnam, cats were taken off, or it was outlawed. Cat meat trade was outlawed back in, I think, 1998. So it was a long time ago. And unfortunately, that government was not very good at enforcing that law. So cat meat trade is actually very, very massive industry in Vietnam, even though it was banned. So it's the question, the biggest hurdle to face is obviously to enact change, like legal legislative changes. But then the other side of the coin is enforcing those laws. And will they be successful in enforcing it? So that's the area of concern. But certainly, we're miles ahead than we were before COVID-19. So I think it really forced China to take a deeper look at what is going on in their country. Their country is huge, and to be a little bit more cautious to try to curb the next pandemic. I mean, we all know it came from live animal markets, and these markets have been the wildlife trade has been banned from these markets, so they're no longer able to sell just about anything. Like before, it was bats and rats and snakes and God knows what.
Now, let me ask you a question to clarify that, because that's a really interesting point. Now, you say that in the wet markets, wild animals are no longer allowed to be sold. Is that China throughout the whole country, or what is in what? How is that enforced, or how because is that a new thing? Pretty much.
A new thing. It came out April 9th.
Okay.
No, actually, they put a ban on. I'll correct myself.
Yeah.
Put an official ban in February to curb the pandemic. Okay, that's the reason why they put it in place. And then it was revised to be a little bit more permanent in nature. And they really specified the list of animals that can be sold for consumption, exploitation, medicinal purposes. And so they've removed many animals from that list. But, will it be enforced? I spoke to Jill Robinson, as you saw, and she told me
yes.
There are a lot of very dedicated local activists in China, and they squealed on them. Like the minute they saw certain animals being sold in markets, they called the enforcement, the authorities, and it was banned. So I think we'll have some success because there's a growing number of local activists in China, and they really are dedicated to animals. So I think, like you said, China, when they decide something is banned, I think they're very capable of ensuring that. So
great.
We can remain hopeful.
We can remain hopeful. Should we watch another clip now? Let me bring up another one. Now, this will be with Dr. Li, I believe.
The start point of all animal, protection movements across the world. You're starting with the dogs and cats, and then you move to other, animals, right? So step by step, right? So it's not that we are not caring.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, because what is the easiest category of animals for us to remove from slaughter? Like, it would be dogs and cats. That's the most thing, because dogs and cats in most of the world are not food.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Li is Humane Society's International China Policy Specialist. He's got a PhD. He understands China politics more than anyone. He was born and raised in China. So he was saying there in that clip that basically the reason why we're so adamant about banning the dog-cat meat trade as opposed to, animal agriculture. I mean, I am vegan and I'm fighting for all animals. But why this is so important to us is because it's the easiest category of animals to eliminate from consumption. Because in most of the world, dogs and cats are companion animals, and they have protection laws, and they're not made to be on our plates. Dogs were, throughout history, they were never bred to be food. They were really bred to be man's companion. They were our partners in hunting. They were herd partners. They were there for protection. So it's really, if we can ban the dog-cat meat trade, that's like the first step. If I ask my government overnight to go stop the meat industry, it's not going to work. But
we do have a lot of people we're working with that are working hard on that. So we don't want to say that's not going to work, because they are really making leadway.
Short term, it won't work. I mean, long term, we've come a long way. Vegans are more and more vegans, and people are becoming more and more aware. There's more information out there than ever before. See documentaries. So for me, my fight is dog-cat. At this stage, because I think we have a chance at winning it in my lifetime. I think we could see the ban.
Well, we're hoping to see a lot more than just the end of the dog and cat meat trade. But I understand what you're saying completely. Let's go ahead and watch another clip here. Where did I leave off? Let's try
And
this.
we revamped all of their kennels. We built another 100 different living rooms for the dogs.
Wow.
Provided a full-time vet, full-time grooming station, a full-time groomer, 2 vet techs, a new auntie they call them, which is like a caretaker. So really, we just staffed it up and upped the food, cured all the skin issues, got them flea and tick medicine. So I would say of 140 dogs, 130 dogs that are there, I would say tomorrow, all but 5 could be adopted to homes in America, and they would fit right in. And these are all dogs that were saved from the meat trade.
Great. So that's John Sessa from Vanderpump Dogs. So how did you come to know John? I've known John for a long time, like 5 years. I think he was actually one of the that was actually one of the first organizations that I worked with. In fact, the way I got into becoming vegan and the dog and cat meat trade was through Animal Hope and Wellness and through Lisa Vanderpump's organization. So I was just curious how you came to know John and how that all unfolded. You want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, John was great. He was very open. I don't know him. Like, I've never met him, but I approached him to be on the podcast. And he was very quick to say yes, because almost everyone I invited on the podcast to this date, they've all been very positive because, like me, they realized there was nothing out there like this, like an opportunity for people to learn, to ask questions with people that are on the ground that know the issue better than anyone. So I really enjoyed my conversation with John. And in that segment, he was telling us how they've basically worked with the local shelters in China, and they revamped their whole operations. They provided them with vet techs, like he was saying. They revamped the whole kennels for dogs. They made it like nice and pleasurable for people to go adopt dogs, in those shelters. And so at least that's Vanderpump Dog Foundation. They've done great work. They started really in 2016, actively involved, and John travels to and back from China every 5 weeks. So he understands the issues very well. So it was great to have him on the podcast.
It's great that you're talking to people that are on the ground, boots on the ground in China, so that you know that the information you're getting is, totally valid, right? So that's a really good thing. Let's watch another clip. Now this is the one I want to warn people. It starts off a little sad, terrible, actually horrible, but it does get better. So let's watch it. It's
dog in the slaughterhouse. I find him in a cage. He was on his back. The mouth open, he was stuck in the bar of the cage, and for 3 days, the people from the slaughterhouse tell me he have no eat, no drink, no move. He was totally traumatized, and I have rescued this dog, bring him to the shelter. He was trembling, and he was so scared that it was near impossible to breathe or to eat. He was really terrible. Wow. And now this dog live in a beautiful family in England, and he is very happy. And he have a friend dog, and he have a wonderful life.
So that is the story of King. The dog in the video is King, and his story touched me deeply. It's the sound of animals. Michael Chor, who's originally from France, he traveled in 2003 to Thailand, and he realized there was a big problem with dogs being sold and butchered up, for food. And he decided to stay on, and he started the Sound of Animals. And basically what his job at this point, because Thailand did great work, Soy Dog Foundation did amazing work, spaying and neutering stray dogs because there was an overpopulation. It was crazy. In Bangkok alone, there was about 650,000 stray dogs. When John first arrived, that was in 2003. And so they've reduced the overpopulation size dramatically. And so since I think it's in 2014 that Thailand banned the dog cat meat trade in that country. So the Sound of Animals, although they are located in the north of Thailand, they work in Cambodia because Cambodia is home to very big dog cat meat trade, mostly dogs. And they're kept in horrible conditions. It's really appalling. And So King has a very nice ending. He now lives in England. He was adopted by a wonderful family. And so it's beautiful. I always try to bring a little bit of hope and inspiration in my podcast, and a story like King is very,
Yeah.
very hopeful. So
Well, I think all of those stories that you've brought to me, at least the ones that you've offered, were hopeful. Jill's story is amazing. That's such good news. All of them have been great news. We have one more clip on that line. Let me just go ahead and play that.
oh,
And
that-
when I went back to China last October for a conference, and
I
I
did
did
a
a
side
field
field
trip
trip
to
to
a
a
dog
dog
meat
meat
store,
store,
and
and
outside the
outside the
store, I
store, I
saw
saw
Samoyed,
Samoyed,
totally,
yeah,
totally sad. Samoyed
Samoyed
sitting
sitting
outside,
outside,
adopted
into
into the
the
homes
homes
of
of
Harvard
Harvard
University,
University
law
law
schools,
schools
parents.
parents.
And
oh,
And
her
her
first day in New
New
York,
York,
and
and
then
and
the
then
first
the
in the
first in the
United
United
States,
States,
she
she
already
already
attended
attended
Harvard
Harvard
University.
University.
She was in Harvard.
Love it. I love that. That's
I
great.
know, another success story, and that was Dr. Peter J. Lee, and it's just amazing to see the transformation. That dog looks so sad, and now he's could not be happier. So
Yeah, that's really good news. So I guess, is there anything else you want to say about that? I was just going to ask you a little bit about, how'd you get involved in the project? What was your inspiration to get into all of this stuff? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
yes, of course. So I became vegan a long time ago. Although at the time there was no internet, I had no knowledge that there was such a thing as being vegan. But I stopped eating meat at age 15 because I saw a small footage of Slaughterhouse from PETA.
Mhm.
Back then, I guess my best friend had a sister, and she was a member of PETA, and she gave us this VHS tape. And one afternoon, we started watching it, and I was disgusted. I could not believe that this is what I was participating in, unwillingly, unconsciously, I guess, because most of us have been raised by meat-eating parents.
Yes.
And so I made that decision right then and there to cut out all meat. And I did that for about 4 years. I was completely vegan and no honey. I would read the newsletters from PETA and say, okay, can't eat this, can't eat that, dairy's bad. And I just did it like that. There was no Google, so I had no information, but I just did it out of the goodness of my heart. And so my history is that I've always been very compassionate towards animals, but eventually I did start including eggs in my diet because I had gone sick. So about 4 years after becoming vegan, so around 19, I started including eggs, and later on I did include fish. But what got me back into being a vegan and now an animal activist is
Yeah.
Yulin. When I first heard about Yulin Dog Meat Festival, it was my first. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was fake news, or it must be unreal. Like there's no way that a whole population is like torturing dogs for fun
Right.
and
Yeah.
calling it a festival. So, but the more I dug around, the more I researched, I discovered that Yulin Dog Meat Festival is the tip of the iceberg. It's a much broader issue called the dog cat meat trade. It's
Yeah.
not just in China, in South Korea, and that's where the farms come in, because South Korea is the only country in the world that farms dogs.
Really.
And so it's at an industrial level. So they have large scale operations with thousands of dogs that are bred on farms in wire cages
Right.
in horrible conditions.
See, that's what I was referring to before. So I wasn't trying to, it just was a little confusing. I guess you were referring to just China doesn't anyway, but
China
there are
does not farm
farms.
dogs. Yeah,
Yeah.
China does not farm dogs. They steal
Oh.
dogs and they grab
So
them
it's against the law in China, is that right?
It's
Or-
not, there's no law in China for animal protection. So that's another problem. And
Yeah.
that's why a lot of the dogs that are rescued from the dog meat trade, they are adopted out to other countries because
Yeah.
there's no protection. So it often happens where it's a different culture. So in China, you'll have a dog and you don't have him on a leash.
Right.
So by the time you're texting someone, a dog snatcher could have taken your dog. It's that easy. and it happens very regularly. People will throw poison food at the dog eats it, he falls sick, and they grab him from your property. It's so it would be a high risk proposition to have a dog that was so abused to, be adopted out in China and risk being victimized again. So that's one of the reasons why we try to adopt them out to the US, to Europe, to Canada.
Yes.
And so there's no law. The only law, and that's why we say it is illegal, the dog cat meat trade in China, because the Animal Epidemic Prevention Law of the People's Republic of China, in 2013, there was an amendment that dogs need to be vaccinated. And we all know that no dog is vaccinated. So it's illegal. So they snatch off the streets. They're full of diseases. They have sometimes rabies, and they're slaughtered and horrible conditions, not sanitary whatsoever. And so it is an infringement upon the law, that law, but no one's enforcing it because it's done in very rural communities. It's not done in big cities like Beijing, and the enforcement is just not there.
So do you think because of COVID-19 and the attention that has been brought upon China as a result, that this will help pressure the government and maybe help some of these laws that are being presented to be enforced?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they came out with those laws. I mean, we're looking at historical landmark decisions out of China, and the only reason why it's happening is because of the pandemic. It's really put a global spotlight on China. And obviously it's, and I wouldn't say that, like Animals Asia has been in talks with government officials for years at trying to implement animal protection laws. And it's a slow burn, like it's just not a priority. But now it's become a priority. So I think absolutely it's a game changer at this point.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Well, if there's a silver lining that came out of this COVID-19 pandemic, it's certainly that,
Yes, and there's been a lot of media coverage about the wet markets and so forth. And so for the first time, mainstream media is talking about what goes on in slaughterhouses, except they call them meat packing plants. So it's still sanitized. But the mere fact that the mainstream media is talking about it is a huge plus. So I agree. I think this is going to be a turning point. We've got to keep our fingers crossed and keep putting the pressure on now more than ever. Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I think we need to look at our own live wet markets.
Yes.
We have some everywhere, And so who's to say that the next pandemic won't come from chickens,
Right. Well, it already has. In the past, we have had the avian flu. So,
but, even factory farms, I mean, there's antibiotics that are given to the animals. But it's more sanitary maybe, but it's certainly not ethical. And I think we need to wake up and realize we do not need to eat meat, right? At this point in time, it's more apparent than ever, and it's causing us so many issues, environmental issues. The environmental impact from animal agriculture is huge. It's causing us health problems. So we need to take ownership of our own health. I think it's an individual decision as well. Like we need to take a stand for what is right, what is decent. And these live animal markets are horrible, and we need to try to put an end to it and leverage this pandemic to do so.
Well, I think you're doing an amazing job, and the initiative you took to start the first podcast is simply amazing. We have a comment here, a couple of comments. Actually, we have someone here, kind of a troll, but we have someone here. It's a lot, this Miriam Shiro, not the troll. It's in a lot of parts of Asia, not just China, but South Korea. It's in Vietnam, Cambodia, and also in West Africa. Philippines, that's right, the Philippines. We haven't spoken about.
No, Philippines.
And Switzerland, they said. So do you think what do you say? How do you weigh in on all of that?
The Philippines made it illegal in 1998. Hong Kong has been illegal. I'm talking about strictly the dog cat meat trade in 1950.
Okay.
Taiwan outlawed the trade in 2003. Thailand in 2014. And the U.S. put a ban on it in December of 2018. So that was HR 6720. So.
Yes, I agree with that. But, there are, of course, and will continue to be factions, even within this country, where that is still going on behind the scenes. So if it's happening here, I'm sure it's happening elsewhere.
Absolutely. It's happening in Africa, parts of Africa. It's happening in India. It's not just, it's in Asia.
Everywhere.
Yes, but it's not everywhere. I mean, the dog cat meat trade, we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about that. It's not everywhere. It's really specific to Asia,
Mm-hmm.
which is why we're fighting so hard, because like it's a portion of the world that's doing this. And if we can just eliminate that, it would go a long way into enforcing other laws against animal cruelty. But it is, I've said it from the get-go. It's in China, South Korea, Cambodia. The Vietnam is probably the second largest country with a dog cat meat trade other than China.
Mm-hmm.
It's even bigger than South Korea. And South Korea has about, they slaughter about 2 million dogs every year.
Wow.
And, Vietnam, 5 million, and China, 10 million. Cambodia, Indonesia, it's a little bit everywhere in those areas.
So from what you've learned in your study and work in this field, do you think that most of the people still believe that it enhances their health, or is it tradition, or why are they so attached? And why is it so difficult to break from this tradition, knowing how cruel and how the world is watching? Why do you think it persists and continues?
I've asked that to my guests many times. It's although it's a small percentage of the population, China being so densely populated, it still brings about big numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a myth, in certain cultures like China. They think it enhances a man's virility by eating the meat of a dog that was tortured or severely abused, because the adrenaline makes the meat taste better. But with all the guests I've interviewed to date, it seems that the practice of torturing the dogs specifically, deliberately, is not so widespread. It's really more isolated cases, maybe. All the images we've seen on the internet of like dogs being blowtorched alive and put in a vat of boiling water alive.
Yeah.
I mean, those are, yes, it did happen. Obviously, they're not doctored images, but it's not like widespread. It's not like a standard practice, because the slaughterhouses have a job to do. They have limited staff. And they have, for example, one slaughterhouse that Dr. Peter J. Lee interviewed. He interviewed the slaughterhouse owners. He said, do you deliberately torture dogs? Like, do you spend your time like trying to beat the dogs? And they said, listen, we have 50 dogs that we have to slaughter, skin, remove the hair, and gut out.
Oh, please, let's not go on with it.
In 3 hours.
Yeah.
So there's no way we can be spending our time torturing the dog for hours. So,
well, I've heard both sides to that, but that sounds good. I hope that's true. Yes. I hope
it's just the whole industry, like farming of animals, is cruel.
It's horrible. So it all has to end. In the end, wet markets, when I said all over the world, I was referring to wet markets in general. They have to end. They have to go.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, all of the pandemic diseases have been caused by wet markets. There really is no reason at all.
No, and it's costing the world so much. Right now, like our global economy has been crippled.
Yeah.
The world's on snooze button because of this.
Yeah.
So this doesn't it's not a wake-up call. What will it take,
Yes, I agree with that for sure. Okay, well, is there anything else you want to add here?
Well, I just hope, I want to encourage your viewers to check out the podcast. It's on YouTube. It's called Stop Yulin. So it's very simple. And I use the word Yulin not so much to say Stop Yulin Dog Meat Festival. Yulin for me is symbolic of animal cruelty. And so the podcast will eventually cover other themes of, animal farming.
Yes.
We're going to cover the fur trade. But for now, I started the podcast only 6 months ago. And my focus was really to learn about the dog cat meat trade in Asia, because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much inaccurate information on the net that I wanted to have an opportunity to speak to people who know What are the issues? Why is it still prevalent? What is causing this? And what are the solutions? Because often people on social media, they sign petitions left and right, but I felt like there must be something more that we can do. And certainly our guests offer up a lot of, ideas. And some of them said, it would take a local celebrity, like a Chinese celebrity, to really endorse that message that dog meat is not cool, it's out of date, it's, and to perpetuate that in the mindset, create a new mindset in the Chinese population that, dog meat is not for us. It's not a good thing. And so other things that we can do is we can sponsor, we can volunteer for some of these organizations. They need volunteers. We can donate certainly to the right organizations doing legitimate work.
Can you name some of the organizations here that people could, because I know there are a lot of overseas, you said they could volunteer. Are there any in particular you could name? Not to put you on.
For example, I can give you my example because I live in Montreal, Canada, and
Yeah.
I'm a volunteer for HSI because Humane Society International have their offices here in Montreal in Canada. And they rescued many dogs from South Korea, and they bring them over here, and we get to work with them, and we get to try to socialize the dogs. We look after them, we take care of them, and it's a wonderful opportunity. And you see up front and personal, like the transformation in these dogs, because from day one, they're skittish, they're anxious, they're very fearful.
Yeah.
And then at the end of, like, let's say 2 months, it's not the same dog. The dog is playing. Some dogs rebound very quickly. Some dogs will take much longer, but most of them, they do make a great recovery, and they are adopted into good families, and they have a chance at a good life. So I guess I would just say watch Stop Yulin on YouTube. I post new episodes every month because I'm a full-time. I have a full-time career, so this is on the side that I do this. It takes a lot of time and research and the interview process, but for me, it's worth it because it's my passion. I want to see the end of this trade. I want to understand it. So if you want to put an end to anything, you need to understand it through and through. And the podcast has been an amazing tool at discovery and learning, and I think viewers are getting a lot out of it. So
That's wonderful.
YouTube, Stop Yulin, check it out. And
I put the link in here, and I will also put it in the main description. I just put the link in the conversation part, so it'll be in both places, so people can go visit your podcast, Stop Yulin, on YouTube. Yes,
and also
go ahead.
The more views, the more subscribers to the podcast, the more I can enlist future guests. And not just that, at one point you get higher up on the, YouTube is all about statistics, right?
Yeah.
And, data. So, the more higher up we go, and people can learn about this trade, just by Googling something, they'll come up with a podcast and they can learn, because I think it's important not to fall into all these myths and rumors, and I think you need a central source of valid, reliable information, and that was the goal of the podcast, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of that.
Great. Well, I think you're doing a great job. So maybe you can come on again in a few months when you have some new stories to tell us about.
I can tell you the guests to date on my podcast, because I don't post them that regularly. It's every 6 months. It's been 6 months, so I have about 7 episodes. But I've interviewed obviously Vanderpump Dog Foundation, Soy Dog, which is a huge foundation in Thailand, John Daly. I've interviewed No Dogs Left Behind, Jeffrey Berry and Tina Peters.
Nice.
So we did separate shows. Animal Hope and Wellness. China, we had an interview with Suki Su.
Suki, I love Suki. Know her very well.
She's such a great girl, and she's done
wonderful.
so much for this cause.
Very shy, but cool.
Oh, she was adorable. I loved her. Yeah. And Dr. Barbara was also with Suki during the interview.
Barbara, yeah.
And I last night, I just finished my podcast with Change for Animals Foundation, which is a fantastic organization headed by Lola Weber and Harry Ekman out of England. So they are focusing on Indonesia. And so it's great to have a podcast on that market because it varies. Like South Korea's dog meat farms, China's like stolen pets, Indonesia is a whole different market as well. So it was great to have her on the show. And there are many, many more guests to come.
Great. Well, that sounds exciting. And we definitely want to stay in touch and keep up with you from time to time, have you on and talk about it some more. Because I think the more we talk about it, the more it gets out there. And that's another good thing we want to ask everyone. Please share out this video. Have watch parties, share, tell your friends about it so that we can get the word out. And
More the better.
Yes. And please tune in every Sunday night at 7 because that's what time we're going to be here.
I will be there. Next Sunday.
Thank you. All right. So what would sorry, is there anything, I was going to ask you one more question and then see if there's anything else you want to add, but I was going to ask you, like, if it was what would you like to see happen as a result of the efforts you're doing? How would you like this to unfold?
Obviously the end of the dog cat meat trade is our ultimate goal, but I just want to build community. I mean, I did it out of service for the community of activists that are fighting this trade, and I think it was appreciated. So I want more and more to gain more and more momentum, for it to reach a wider audience, for people to become more involved. And every episode you learn something new, and it gives you great tips and tools on what you can do, because often we feel powerless. I'm in Canada, like, what can I really do? But you can't be limited like that, because we live in a world that's extremely united. Globalization did that, and we can make a difference really by not just signing petitions, but by getting involved and working with certain organizations that will touch you more than others. You can definitely volunteer as a flight volunteer. This is something that they absolutely need, these organizations, to get the dogs out. I mean,
like Wings of Rescue is a good.
So it cuts their costs in half of flying a dog from China to the US. If you have someone that says, "This is my dog, I'm going on the plane, he's my dog," it costs half the price. I mean, it's very, very expensive to take dogs out, all the care that they need, because they are in horrible conditions. Some of them need surgeries. So donations are a great way. I know some people are hesitant because they don't know the organization through and through, but you can get to know them through the podcast, so.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on tonight, Jade. We really enjoyed having you, and I can't wait for next time and to hear what you bring us what more stories you can bring us then. So that'll be wonderful.
And if I can just close with a comment,
I've
seen some of these comments, and why not save other animals? Of course, I said it from the get-go. I'm vegan. I'm heavily involved in the activist community that we have here in Montreal. I regularly go to vigils, and I'm very active on that front. But you don't have to limit yourself. Like, we're talking about the dog cat meat trade, but it doesn't mean that we can't fight for all other causes.
And whoever is saying that, just tune in next week, because we'll be championing another animal rights issue. That's what the show is about. It's called the Action Hour, because what we do is bring on different organizations and people taking action to make change, to make the world a better place for animals, people, and the environment. So
that's wonderful.
So there you go.
So I'll definitely tune in next Sunday.
Oh, that'd be great. And thank you so much for being on and giving us all this amazing information. I learned a lot. So thank
you, Lindsey, for having me on. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak about the podcast and the cause.
Okay, let's keep in touch.
Okay, we will.
Okay, bye-bye.